Think about those people who just seem to glide through social stuff.
Yeah.
Always seem okay, always know what to do, what to say.
Effortless.
Yeah, seems effortless. But for a lot of autistic folks, especially women, girls, non-binary people, that performance, it's anything but effortless.
Exactly. It's this intense, often hidden work we call masking.
It has a real cost.
It really does. So today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that. Autistic masking. We're looking at this labor involved in appearing neurotypical.
And why the people who get really, really good at it often get missed, completely missed by the systems meant to help.
Yeah, the research we've looked at points to this strange paradox. The very strategy that helps someone navigate the world
Ends up hiding them.
pretty much. It hides their needs, sometimes even their own sense of who they are.
Wow. It's kind of a heartbreaking irony, isn't it? All that work to fit into a world not built for you makes it harder to actually be seen, to be understood.
Yeah. It's like one source put it, some people end up almost erased by design. The system itself contributes to their invisibility.
Okay, so where do we start unpacking that? It feels huge.
Let's start with that idea of creating a socially acceptable version of myself. Research really highlights this. It's not always like a conscious decision every morning, today I'll wear this mask.
No, it sounds more ingrained than that.
Exactly. Especially for people raised in certain environments, maybe patriarchal settings or strict religious homes, culturally conservative places. It gets baked in really early.
Like you just absorb these rules without even being told explicitly sometimes.
Yeah, you learn maybe the hard way that some behaviors, some needs, they just aren't okay. They need to be pushed down if you want to be seen as.
Nice. Agreeable. Not difficult.
Precisely. Don't rock the boat. And the consequences, if you don't follow those unspoken rules, can feel, well, pretty severe.
So this constant effort to be acceptable, it becomes second nature.
So much so that people might think it's just your personality. You might even get praised, right? For being sensitive or empathetic or gifted.
But those very traits
Can be the result of intense, hidden effort for the person masking. That's the key thing. It's not just tiring. The things people praise can actually obscure the real needs underneath.
And then there's this moment, maybe later in life,
Yeah.
when you realize, wait, not everyone is doing this constant self-editing. That must be quite a blow to realize it's not universal. It's actually this heavy burden you've been carrying.
Yeah, the sources talk about real grief around that. This feeling of, it's almost like a cruelty, isn't it? Being forced to twist yourself into shapes just to belong.
And then trying to unlearn all that, to figure out who you are underneath the mask after years, maybe decades.
It's incredibly hard, painful, often. Lots of digging, lots of old feelings coming up.
Which brings us to the diagnostic systems. Because if you're masking so well, how do they even see you?
That's a critical point. These systems, as some research points out, they're not neutral observers. They often rely on seeing things, external stuff, obvious behaviors.
Right. Visible impairment.
But what about the people whose struggles are mostly internal, locked away behind that effective mask?
And there are biases too, right? Like with gender.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. A boy acts out in class. Maybe he gets flagged for an assessment. But a girl who's maybe just as distressed, but she withdraws, goes quiet, dissociates.
She might get praised. Oh, she's so well behaved.
Exactly. Even though she might be struggling intensely inside, the way it looks on the outside dictates the response.
And think about all those internal things.
Yeah.
The clenched jaw, the stomach constantly in knots, the endless internal chatter just planning the next sentence.
Completely invisible from the outside, you can look totally calm, composed.
While inside, it's just
Yeah.
a storm.
And that's the systemic flaw, isn't it? The tools are often built to catch the people who can't hide it so well.
Not the ones who become experts at hiding it.
Right. They're designed to detect the failure to mask, not the success.
It makes you think. Someone finally gets to a point, maybe as an adult, where they just can't keep the mask up anymore. They reach out for help, and they get asked, well, why didn't you say anything before?
Yeah, like it was just a choice. Like they could have just spoken up easily.
But it's not about not wanting to communicate.
Yeah.
It's the way the distress shows up just wasn't what the system was looking for. It's a design flaw.
Exactly. It's a fundamental mismatch between the experience of high masking autism and the methods used to identify it.
And Culture plays a massive role in this invisibility too, doesn't it?
Hugely. The source material really digs into this. Things like, strong patriarchal norms or strict religious rules or just a heavy emphasis on being respectable.
They can crank up the pressure to mask.
Absolutely. It stops being just about fitting in socially and becomes about, well, basic survival sometimes.
Yeah.
Safety.
There was that personal story mentioned about being adopted into a culture where you had to be compliant, grateful, always normal.
Right. And in that kind of setup, showing distress isn't seen as like a neurological difference. It's seen as a moral issue. Defiance, maybe. Ingratitude.
So masking just becomes automatic, a
I
reflex.
ultimately can't afford not to mask.
And that other example, masking as a young teen in a warehouse, pretending to be older, more capable, just to keep a job.
Yeah, that really shows how deep it can go for economic survival. The lines between the mask and, well, who you even are, they get incredibly blurry.
It becomes hard to even know it's real anymore.
And then you have changes in diagnostic criteria, like the DSM needing traits to show up across multiple settings.
Right.
Well, what if you match really well at work or school, but kind of fall apart at home, or only with one trusted person?
You might not meet the criteria anymore, even if you had a diagnosis before.
It's a risk. You might look too fluent, too composed, too functional in those settings where they assess you.
Wow, that's the cruel double bind they talked about.
Exactly. You're struggling immensely, you need support. But because you've learned to hide it so well to survive,
You don't look autistic enough to get the support you need,
it's a devastating catch-22, truly.
which links into this. This paradox of functioning, right? In a society that really values independence, productivity.
Self-regulation, all that.
The very skills you develop to cope, being composed, articulate, useful, they actually work against you when you ask for help.
It is incredibly ironic, isn't it? You pass too well. You look like you're managing.
So the system, which often allocates help based on how much need is visible,
Completely misses you. You become invisible precisely because your coping mechanisms are effective on the surface.
that constant work, that labor of creating a socially acceptable version of yourself, it's vital for survival, maybe economically.
But then it gets turned around. You're too articulate. You seem too emotionally aware. You're successful. How can you need help?
The system struggles to see the impairment because it's masked.
Exactly. It mistakes the performance for the reality.
And that example of performing gender, creating like a masculine cosplay from scripts.
Yeah, that really drives home how deep the performance can go and how well it can hide real distress.
But what happens when that mask, after years and years, finally cracks? When you just can't do it anymore?
That's the thing. There's often no framework, no safety net ready, because everyone was used to the performance. The system wasn't prepared for the reality underneath.
Because it was always focused on the surface.
Always focused on that external presentation. It lacks the nuance to see the hidden cost. If you don't show your struggles in the expected way.
Your suffering gets missed, invalidated.
Yeah. And living like that, constantly invalidated, disbelieved, it takes a massive emotional toll.
The sources talk about the long-term stuff. Burnout, obviously, but also like real identity confusion. Who even am I under all this?
And just chronic emotional exhaustion. It's debilitating.
It's quite something to think you could get an autism diagnosis, finally have a name for it, but still doubt it yourself.
Because you spent so long performing normalcy, internalizing that external view that you seem fine.
And, ironically, being able to explain your needs clearly.
Sometimes makes professionals doubt you more. You're too self-aware.
Wow. And the research mentioned misdiagnoses like BPD, that's common.
Especially for women and AFIB individuals, yes. Studies show it's quite frequent. Or bipolar, or ADHD, or just being told it's all trauma.
Before eventually landing on an ADHD diagnosis, perhaps?
It highlights a real pattern. This isn't just one or two unfortunate cases. It's systemic. The system often misinterprets the signs in high-masking individuals.
Living under the wrong labels, getting treatments that don't quite fit.
Yeah.
Sounds incredibly heavy.
It is. And that masking habit, it can even follow you into therapy.
Really?
Even there.
Yeah, making it harder to actually unmask and do the work. And then if a therapist seems surprised by your insights or hesitates,
More self-doubt creeps in. Exactly. It's a cycle. And the overall impact on your sense of self, it can feel like you're just vanishing inward, disappearing, because the outside world doesn't see the real you.
there's got to be a way out,
Yeah.
right? A path towards reclaiming yourself.
There is. The sources talk about reaching a point where the mask just costs too much. It's unbearable. And that's often the start of a journey. Difficult, but liberating.
Finding that authentic self again.
And recognition is key here, both, getting the right clinical diagnosis eventually.
But also community.
Hugely important. Finding other neurodivergent people who just get it,
Right.
where you don't have to explain or perform, where your differences are just accepted, normal even.
And it must be incredibly validating.
It can completely change how you see yourself. You shift from thinking I'm broken to understanding, oh, I was just being misread.
By a world set up differently.
Exactly. And then you can start shifting how you exist in that world, maybe moving from performing distress in ways you think others will understand.
To just expressing what's real for you.
Yeah.
Authentically.
Yeah. And moving from constantly justifying why you need things.
To just asserting your needs as a right.
Because belonging is a right. As one source put it beautifully, it's not something you earn by conforming. You get to show up as you are, unsmoothed, unfiltered, unmistakably real.
That's powerful. The piece we look at ends with that poem, Somewhere Else. It felt like it captured so much of this.
It really did. That feeling of being present but unseen, communicating but not being understood.
We were not hiding. You just called the wrong names, read the wrong signs, held the wrong image up to the light.
We were always here, beneath the scripted laughter, behind the clean lines, under the borrowed clothes.
You said we were quiet, but we were speaking just not in the language you taught us, not in the shape you expected.
You searched for us in the noise, we bloomed in the hush. You wanted proof of struggle. We lived entire lives of it unseen.
You didn't lose us. You never looked in the right place.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive really drove home that central paradox of masking, didn't it? This survival tool that ends up kind of tragically getting in the way of diagnosis, support, and even self-understanding.
Yeah, and we saw how the systems themselves, diagnostic tools, societal expectations, how they actually contribute to making high-masking individuals, especially women, girls, non-binary folks, essentially invisible.
And it's so vital to get this. Masking isn't about not having difficulties. It's a direct result of intense pressure to fit in, combined with, frankly, the limits of how we currently recognize neurodiversity.
The thought I'm left with is, our systems have kind of mistaken survival for success. They see the mask, the performance.
And assume everything's okay underneath. They miss the struggle.
Right. So real change means shifting that whole perspective. It means truly valuing lived experience, understanding that real suffering doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's completely silent on the outside.
Exactly. Like the poem says, we were always here, you just didn't look in the right place. It really pushes you, the listener, to think about what looking in the right place actually means and how we need much more inclusive, much more understanding ways to see and support everyone.